The aim of my thesis is a sociological exploration of environmental awareness and behavior, especially in precarious living situations. Current research on inequality shows that precarious employment and uncertainty are increasing in Germany, and this affects daily life for many people. So my dissertation combines these latest findings from research on inequality with environmental sociology. It looks how a real or perceived decline in social and economic status affects environmental awareness and daily actions like to drive a car or to use public transport. My work is divided in two parts, a quantitative and a qualitative part. And the first empirical part presents a quantitative analysis of data taken from a survey representing a cross-section of the German population. And in this part I compare the environmental awareness and self-reported behavior of those in a permanent full-time job, in a part-time job and in unemployment. And in addition, subjective dimensions are integrated into the analysis, subjective dimensions like dissatisfaction with the current living situation or fear of losing the job. So in the second part, the qualitative part, in this part I use interviews on daily life, especially on the topics mobility, nutrition, housing and holiday. And I asked to what extent an uncertain living situation relates to environmental practices. I distinguish between a subjective and an objective dimension of precariousness. The quantitative part of my study provides first indications that subjective dimensions have more influence on expressed environmental affinity and the willingness to sacrifice than objective social positioning. And the aim of the qualitative part I'm doing at the moment is to look more closely at these initial observations, and I want to know how different forms of dealing with uncertainty relates to environmental awareness and behavior.
There exists a widespread flirt with the idea that an authoritarian regime such as China's could be needed to enforce climate protection measures in the short time we have left, in the media, in political science, in green philosophy. Through an in-depth analysis of the development of China's climate change law, I was able to detect an ongoing transformation towards a climate politics actually much more pluralistic than what was expected. I found that the main initiative for climate policy in China came from cross-border scientific and NGO cooperation and lobbying, rather than Communist Party elite insights. That the whole process for formulation of the climate change law was inspired and designed to fit the needs of civil expertise inclusion, and also that parts of the authoritarian bureaucracy clearly aimed to push more ambitious climate policies through rational cooperation with NGOs.
It is well known that global cooperation is threatened by climate change. However, we know very little about the role political systems play. There are arguments in favor of an eco-dictatorship as well as arguments in favor of a climate democracy. I want to shed more light on this issue by asking, can democracies deal with climate change? Or more precisely, how exactly influences democratic quality the climate performance of democracies? I apply a mixed methods design with two empirical analyses to research the climate-democracy nexus. The first one is quantitative, to see whether there are any statistical hints on that relationship. And the results of the penny regression indicate that there might be a weak positive relationship, which means that more democratic quality leads to a better climate performance. The second empirical analysis is a qualitative case study on Canada's Kyoto Protocol process. The results show that an incomplete or only partially applied democratic quality can lead to even worse results. Why is this the case? In Canada, for example, inclusiveness in the national climate change process was pretty well arranged. So many different actors like NGOs, industry and the provinces were involved. However, there were no participation in deliberation structures that brought all the different opinions and views together. So in the end, the views were even more contrary than at the beginning of the process. So it was more a process of immobilizing decision-making rather than facilitating decision-making. My assumption to the question, can democracies deal with climate change, is yes, they can, but only if the different dimensions of democratic quality are fully applied together so that the interrelations can work out. Otherwise, incomplete democratic quality can lead to even worse results and have a negative impact on the climate performance.
Congregations haven't been in the focus of innovation and environmental sociology, looking for civil bottom-up innovation processes, since most of the church members belong to conservative and traditional milieus. So the two big Christian churches, the Protestant and the Catholic Church in Germany, haven't been linked to new ideas and to innovation processes, since most of the time we see them as some kind of status keepers. But in fact, there are some active local churches involved in such civil bottom-up innovation processes. So my aim is to analyze the roles they played in the innovative and establishing process and first diffusion processes. And the question I'm trying to focus on is how do the innovation pioneers get along with their innovative action in their local niches? And how do they act within and in cooperation with their local churches? Which motives do they have, and which motives do first follower or first adopters have? I try to answer those questions by using open and qualitative methods on 3 case studies, and they are located in 3 small different German towns, where, for example, people try to install a collective-owned solar power plant, for example, on a church rooftop. My qualitative research can give a more specific insight on the social communication processes that are part of the innovation and establishing processes. I have identified 3 roles yet. The first is that local churches work as a persuasive opinion leader. That means they create confidence by succeeding with their innovative action. The second role is that local churches are performing or perform active bridge building within and beyond their local community by, for example, cooperating with local associations, other congregations, and also politics. And the third role is that those churches consider the innovation as a basic function of safeguarding God's creation. So they are using religious arguments for their diffusion.
Well, the aim of my thesis is to evaluate to what extent the democratic quality of an EU policy process actually affects its output performance. And the particular case I'm looking at is the process leading to the Renewable Energy Directive, taking place between 2005 and 2008. And to my normative understanding, the democratic quality is determined by the gradual manifestation of deliberative and participatory elements. When it comes to participation, things to look at are transparency or, of course, also the involvement of affected and interested parties. On the other hand, I ask, for instance, are viewpoints adjusted due to real convergence of positions of the involved actors, or are they just the outcome of pure horse trading? Well, on the theoretical level, at first I develop the empirical indicators to determine the democratic quality of the policy process. which is actually quite new, since most indicator sets focused either on a state level, so ask is state A more democratic than state B, or on a very specific level of specific discussion places, like, for instance, parliamentary debates or something like that. So this would be kind of new in the theory part. And when it comes to the empirics, many parts of the work would suggest up to now a positive relation between the democratic quality and the climate performance. Two examples of my insight so far would be first, stakeholder meetings without predefined topics and with a diverse composition of actors typically come to more ambitious results and more ambitious positions than the ones who were quite fixed from the beginning on. And secondly, in most cases, the majority of the participants who took part in the public consultations also had quite ambitious positions. However, very often it was the case that the institutional actors actually did not consider those ambitious positions on climate policy, since they are not obliged to. So one of the central recommendations I would have so far on the basis of my results would be that clearer rules are needed on how to deal with stakeholder input on EU level.